The birth of Hephaestus, an unwanted gift from the gods. The silence of Olympus seemed no less majestic than its golden palaces. But beneath that glittering mantle, in the shadow of eternal glory, something else was maturing. Something was maturing that was neither bright nor desirable. Hera, the queen of the gods, the wife of the almighty Zeus, carried a secret within herself, a secret woven from pride and resentment. Her heart, hardened by centuries of rivalry and jealousy, knew no peace. Zeus, the great thunderer, begot children of his own free will, without her participation, without her blessing. And every time a new child of the gods overshadowed the heavens with his birth, Hera felt a sting of injustice, a sharp pain of alienation. And then, in a fit of despair, in an impulse born of pain and the desire to prove her strength, her independence, Hera made a decision. She would not ask Zeus for offspring. She would create one herself, without his seed, without his power. By the power of her will, by the power of her maternal essence, she would mold a child from the same divine matter that makes up heaven and earth itself. The moonlight, silver and cold, became her instrument. It poured through the branches of the sacred olives, touched her hands as she leaned over the bed. She mixed the dew collected from the petals of night flowers with the dust from the stars that fell on Olympus in silence. Her fingers, once adorned with the gifts of Aphrodite, now moved with fierce concentration, sculpting an image from this ethereal substance, an image that would be hers, and hers alone. There were no triumphal trumpets, no glow of a newborn sun. There was only quiet, intense work. Every breath Hera took was filled with desire, every exhale with determination. She felt life beginning within her, but it was life without the spark that comes from union. It was a birth from loneliness, from a desire for control over one's own destiny. And then, in the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant rumble of the sky, he appeared. Not a child of love, but a child of pride. Not a gift, but a challenge. He was weak, but there was already something special in his appearance. Not the beauty of Apollo, not the strength of Eris. In his features there was stubbornness, hidden power, and something that made the mother's heart clench with incomprehensible longing. Hera looked at him, and there was something more than just motherly love in her eyes. There was fear. Fear of what she had created, fear that this child, born into such unusual circumstances, might not be what she expected. Not shining, not perfect. He was imperfect. His body was deformed. His legs were crooked. This was his first unspoken sin, the sin that prevented him from being desired. Hera, who had sought to create a perfect child, had encountered a reality that surpassed her will. Her creation was not flawless. And in that moment, when her plan failed, her motherly love, if there had been any, evaporated, leaving only bitterness and disappointment. She, the queen of the gods, who had created the child with her own strength, could not bear his deformity. It was a stain on her own perfection, a reminder of her failure. And so, with a cold heart, she made a new decision, a decision that would change her son's destiny forever. She took him in her arms, gently but without warmth, and walked toward the edge of Olympus. The wind ruffled her hair, and below, in the bottomless abyss, the clouds swirled, hiding the earth. With a last look of disgust and despair, Hera pushed her child away. Hephaestus, that was the name of this unwanted son, and he was falling from the heavens, from the pinnacle of the divine world, into the abyss where only oblivion awaited him. His scream, born of pain and fear, was drowned in the roar of the wind. His body, twisted from birth, was hurtling down to a land he had never seen. Thus began the path of Hephaestus, a path woven from pain, loneliness, and rejection, an unwanted gift from the gods, abandoned by his own mother. He was doomed to wander forever far from the shining Olympus. But it was in this abyss, in this fall, that the secret of his future greatness was hidden, a secret that no one could have foreseen. Falling from the sky and loneliness. The wind that had once whispered tenderly in the golden crowns of the olive trees of Olympus was now tearing him apart. Every movement of the air was a blow, every breath a mockery of his fragile, distorted body. Hephaestus was falling from a height where the sun seemed eternal, and the songs of the muses were incessant, falling into an abyss where eternal twilight reigned, and only echoes of divine laughter reached him as if from another world. His cry, soundless at first, turned into a drawn-out groan that dissolved in the roar of the elements. The earth, distant and unknown, rushed towards him, promising only pain and oblivion. He saw how the shining peaks were rapidly diminishing, how the stars, which he seemed to be able to touch with his hand, were fading. In his eyes, which had not yet had time to get used to the earthly light, the entire abyss of rejection was reflected. He was the product of divine will, but rejected by the divine mother, unwanted, superfluous. The fall seemed to last forever. He felt his bones crack under the onslaught of air, his skin burn from the rush of movement. It was not just a physical fall, but the collapse of his entire being before it had even had time to take shape. He had been made of moonlight and stardust, but now he was about to meet the rough, unyielding earth. When he finally reached the bottom, the impact was deafening. There was no soft grass, no springy soil. He fell on sharp, rocky outcrops that seemed to have been torn from the very core of the earth. Pain shot through him, but it was only an echo of the pain that was already lodged in his soul. He lay sprawled among the rocks, his body feeble and broken, a stranger in this wild, untamed world. Olympus, his cradle and his grave, had disappeared from view. Above him stretched a low, gray sky full of swirling clouds. The sounds around him were strange, the rustling of unknown grasses, the distant croaking of birds, the noise of the wind, which now seemed not menacing, but rather mocking. He was alone, absolutely alone. A loneliness as deep and all-encompassing as the abyss itself enveloped him, becoming his first, most faithful companion. The gods, the inhabitants of Olympus, lived in a world of light and harmony, where every movement was measured, every glance was full of grandeur. Here, in this gorge, chaos reigned. The stones were cold and rough. The air was damp and smelled of dampness. He felt the cold penetrating his bones as his body, barely alive, began to cool. His mind, still young and fragile, raced to understand why. Why had the mother who had created him rejected him? What had he done wrong? Was his imperfection so unbearable? These questions, sharp as shards of glass, tore at him from the inside. He did not know that his birth had been an act of pride, not love, and that his deformity was not a curse, but merely the result of the absence of the divine spark born in union. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him. His body refused to obey. Every muscle ached. Every joint felt broken. He was like a fallen statue whose beauty had been distorted before it could be appreciated. His divine nature seemed to be a mockery in this world dominated by the brute force of nature. The days and nights merged into a monotonous sequence. He ate the meager food he could find, wild berries, roots if he had the strength to reach them. He watched the life around him, the nimble lizards, the birds that nested in the crevices of the rocks. He learned to survive. He learned the patience he had never been taught. He learned the fortitude he had never been taught. Sometimes, in rare moments of clarity, when the sun's rays broke through the clouds, he saw glimpses of his divine origin. They flickered in the dewdrops, in the glitter of stones, in the rainbow that appeared after the rain. These glimpses reminded him of where he came from and intensified the bitterness of rejection. But even in this remote place, among the stones and shadows, something new was being born in his soul, something that was neither beauty nor strength. It was aspiration, aspiration to understand, aspiration to create, aspiration to prove that even the rejected can find their place in the world. His loneliness, which had previously seemed a curse, became his refuge, his laboratory. Here, far from the bustle of Olympus, he could begin his journey. A journey that promised to be long and difficult, but perhaps for that very reason, the only true one. Shelter in the depths of the sea, meeting with Thetis and the sea nymphs. The stones on which he had fallen seemed only the first step in an endless descent. The earth he felt beneath his twisted body was harsh and unwelcoming. But even in this wild, untamed wilderness, where the wind sang its eternal songs of lost worlds, fate had prepared a new test for Hephaestus. Unable to withstand the brutal force of his mother's rejection, his wounded body seemed to seek another refuge, and it found it. At one point, when the sun, as if apologizing for its long absence, broke through the curtain of clouds, Hephaestus felt the earth beneath him tremble. Not with a tremor of fear, but rather with the pulsation of life emanating from the depths. It was not the rumble of an earthquake, but rather the deep, guttural sigh of the planet itself. Like a huge beast, it was revealing its secrets. And then, before his astonished gaze, the earth opened up, not like an abyss, but like a portal. From a deep crevice that instantly appeared before him flowed a cool, salty air, smelling of seaweed and unknown depths. It was the smell of the ocean, not the one that splashes along the shores, but the one that hides ancient secrets untouched by the light. Unable to remain in place, driven by an instinct that was stronger than pain, Hephaestus, waddling and leaning on his hands, headed towards this mysterious passage. The way down was long, but different from the fall from Olympus. There was no roaring wind here, only a quiet, measured hum, reminiscent of the breathing of a sleeping giant. The walls of the gorge gradually changed their appearance. Rough stones gave way to smooth rocks, polished by time, along which thin threads of silvery water flowed. The air became more and more humid, and the light became more and more muted, acquiring a greenish tint, as if penetrating the thickness of emerald waters. He didn't know how much time had passed when he finally reached the bottom. But where he had expected to find solid ground, there was only an illusion. The ground beneath his feet had become soft, like soft mud, and a new reality seemed to have opened up around him. Golden light, shining from somewhere above, refracted through the emerald waves, creating a mesmerizing underwater world. He was not drowning. He was in water, but he was breathing freely, as if the air were thick and rich, like the very essence of this place. A vast underwater grotto lay before him. Its walls were adorned with swaying seaweed, like velvet curtains, and strewn with pearls, shimmering with a soft inner light. In the center of the grotto, on a bed of soft sand, surrounded by schools of tiny glowing fish, she rested. Thetis, the sea goddess, daughter of the wise Nereus, whose beauty was as unbridled as the element she personified. Her hair, the color of sea foam, fell over her shoulders, and her eyes, the color of the deep ocean, looked at Hephaestus with curiosity, but without fear. Around her circled the sea nymphs, nereids, their bodies like iridescent shells, their voices the melodic whisper of the waves. They had never seen such a creature, so strange and distorted, but at the same time possessing some inner strength that attracted their gaze. Thetis, whose heart had known the pain of rejection when the greatest god sought her hand, but she chose a mortal, understood Hephaestus. She saw in his deformed body not a deformity, but a sign of destiny, a sign of another deeper power. She extended her hand to him, her fingers graceful and strong, adorned with iridescent coral. "You have fallen far, child of the sky," she whispered, her voice like the sound of the surf. "But here, in my domain, you will find peace." The nymphs, following their mistress's example, surrounded him, their touch as light as the sea breeze. They brought him robes woven of the finest silk, dyed the colors of the sunset over the ocean. They gave him food, gifts of the sea, sweet and succulent, such as he had never tasted before. They cared for him as if he were a precious but fragile treasure. In their company, Hephaestus felt protected rather than outcast. He watched them play in the water, moving nimbly in the weightless environment. He listened to their songs, full of the ancient wisdom of the ocean, and felt his wounds, both physical and spiritual, begin to heal. He began to learn from the nymphs, who showed him how to create amazing things from simple materials: shells, seaweed, iridescent stones. He saw how they weaved wreaths, how they decorated their grottos, how they played with the current, creating bizarre patterns. And in his distorted but dexterous hands, this new, previously unknown to him, power began to awaken. He took a smooth stone in his hands, and under his fingers it began to take shape. He saw something beautiful being born from a shapeless mass. It was not a comparison with Olympic perfection, but something else, the embodiment of inner harmony born from chaos. Thetis watched him with a smile. She saw the spark of creativity awakening in this rejected divine son. She knew his journey was not yet over, but here, in the arms of the ocean, he had found his first refuge. A refuge that would become the cradle of his future mastery. A place where he could begin to create his own world, a world born of fire and water, of pain and hope. First creations, developing mastery in solitude. The underwater grotto, bathed in emerald light, became for Hephaestus not just a refuge, but also a cradle for his budding talent. Thetis, whose wisdom was as deep as the ocean, saw him not as an ugly outcast, but as a vessel filled with unrealized power. The sea nymphs, with their feather-light touches and melodious voices, surrounded him with care, but not guardianship. They gave him the space, the freedom that was necessary for his inner world to blossom. The first thing Hephaestus felt was relief. The absence of the condemning glances, the echoes of contempt that had haunted him since birth, allowed him to breathe deeply. The air here, saturated with salt and the aroma of unknown seaweed, seemed invigorating. He watched the nymphs as they moved in the water, their bodies as if woven from moonlight and pearls, gliding with incredible grace. They wove wreaths of coral and sea flowers, created jewelry from mother of pearl, their fingers thin and dexterous, fluttering over the material like butterflies. Hephaestus, leaning on his still awkward but stronger legs, began to imitate them. He picked up smooth, sea-polished stones, looking for those with interesting textures or colors. His hands, previously familiar only with pain and cold, now felt the softness of the pliable clay he found at the bottom of the grotto, and the elasticity of the seaweed which he could twist and weave. His first creations were simple, but they already had that special spark that distinguished him from everything he had seen. He made small figures of sea creatures from stones, graceful fish with iridescent scales, intricate shells whose swirls resembled the spirals of time. The nymphs admired his work. They brought him new materials, sparkling crystals that seeped from underwater caves, thin threads of silver mined from the depths of the sea, and rare algae that glowed in the dark. Thetis, watching him, saw his face, once distorted by pain and despair, now light up with concentration and quiet joy. She understood that in the solitude and care he found in her kingdom, something more than just the desire to create was awakening. It was healing, the healing of a soul crippled by rejection. Hephaestus discovered that he had a special sense for metals. One day, while exploring underwater caves, he found deposits of native gold and silver that glittered in the semi-darkness like stars that had fallen into the ocean. He took these precious metals and, using stones as tools, began to work them. He learned to shape them, to create from them elegant ornaments that the nymphs wore with delight. But his real discovery was that he could give metal new life using heat. He noticed how volcanic springs gushing from the earth heated the water around them. He began collecting these heated rocks, using them to shape softer metals. It was crude, not subtle, but it was a start. He felt something new being born in his hands, something he could control, something he could shape at will. His craftsmanship grew with each passing day. He learned to mix different metals, creating alloys that were incredibly strong and shiny. He made elegant bracelets that seemed alive, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow, and pendants that emitted a soft, soothing light. His creations were not just beautiful, they carried a piece of ocean magic, an echo of the ancient power that lived in these depths. He also experimented with fire. Not the destructive kind that consumed everything in its path, but controlled heat that could change matter. He discovered that certain clays, when heated to a certain temperature, became hard and waterproof. He began to create vessels from them that were not only beautiful, but also functional, able to withstand the pressure of sea waters. In this solitude, far from the bustle and cruelty of Olympus, Hephaestus found his true home. He did not forget his past, but it ceased to be a source of pain. It became an incentive to create, to transform. He understood that his distorted body was not a curse, but only another path to perfection. A path that required patience, perseverance, and a deep understanding of matter. The nymphs and Thetis became his first students and his first admirers. They admired his work, his ability to transform simple materials into works of art. They saw him not just as a god, but as a master whose hands were capable of performing miracles. And Hephaestus, feeling their recognition, felt his soul fill with power. Power that was born in solitude, but now blossomed in love and care. He was ready for the next step. The step that would change his destiny and the destiny of all Olympus. Return to Olympus. Hidden mastery and revenge. The ocean depths, where emerald light danced on velvety seaweed, became Hephaestus's cradle and school. Under the tender protection of Thetis and the caring attention of sea nymphs, his distorted body gained not only strength, but also purpose. Forgotten solitude gave way to quiet but passionate creativity. His hands, which had previously known only pain, now handled metal, stone, and pearl with amazing dexterity, giving birth to works full of grace and hidden power. He learned to subdue fire, not the kind that blindly devours, but the kind that transforms, that gives matter new life. He became a master whose creations echoed the ancient wisdom of the ocean, its infinite power and mysterious beauty. But deep within him, beneath the surface of his newfound peace, there was a wound that would not heal, the memory of rejection. The image of his mother, Queen Hera, whose pride and disappointment had cast him into the abyss, was seared into his soul. Every glint of gold, every iridescent stone, every blow of hammer on metal, all of this was not just an act of creation, but a quiet, slow preparation for revenge. Not the destructive, furious revenge of Ares, but a subtle, divine punishment born of skill and a deep understanding of the weaknesses of those who had rejected him. One day, when Thetis, sensing the change in her charge, touched his hand, she whispered, "Your path lies not only in the depths, the sky calls you, child." It was time to return, time to show Olympus what he had given birth to. Hephaestus left his underwater kingdom, but not alone. He took with him only the bare necessities, his tools forged in the depths, his craft tempered in solitude. He did not seek glory, he sought justice. His return was not a triumphal procession. Rather, it resembled a shadow gliding across the golden halls. He appeared on Olympus unnoticed, in those hours when the gods were immersed in their concerns, their intrigues, their eternal disputes. His distorted body, his limping gait, all this was well known. But now there was something else behind it. Not pity, but a silent challenge. He did not speak of his return, did not seek meetings. Instead, he found secluded places, far from the glitter and noise, and began to work. His first creations on Olympus were modest, but they were astonishing. He created delicate golden flowers that never faded, and silver statues that seemed to breathe. He made jewelry for the goddesses that was as beautiful as they were functional, like tiaras that warded off evil thoughts, or bracelets that enhanced their natural beauty. His work was perfect in its execution, but there was always a hint of something more than just decoration. The gods, accustomed to their own splendor, did not immediately grasp the depth of what was happening. They saw in him simply a skilled craftsman, a kind of court master who seemed to have miraculously acquired talent. But Hera, whose heart was like granite, felt the chill that emanated from her son. In his eyes, when their glances accidentally met, she saw not the old submissiveness, but a cold determination, a wisdom born of pain. He didn't seek their attention, but his craftsmanship spoke for itself. His work became his voice, his weapon. He created not just objects, but symbols. Symbols of missed opportunities, symbols of spurned love, symbols of divine power that showed up where it was least expected. Little by little, amidst the eternal splendor of Olympus, his most daring creations began to appear. They were not decorations, but machines. Complex, graceful, subservient to him alone. He created automatic servants that moved with silent grace, requiring neither food nor rest. He forged a throne that seemed to be carved from pure light, but when a god or goddess sat upon it, it would chain them to it with an invisible force, making it impossible for them to rise. That was the first step, the step that demonstrated his control. Control over matter, control over machinery, and most importantly, control over those who had once rejected him. He did not scream his vengeance, he showed it through the perfection of his creations, through their hidden power, through the way they served him, not them. And as Hera, queen of the gods, sat on her throne forged by her rejected son, she felt not triumph, but the icy breath of retribution. She, who had borne him to prove her strength, was now a prisoner of his craft. Her pride was broken, her anger powerless. Hephaestus had returned, and Olympus had learned that even he who had been cast into the abyss could return to change the course of things. His vengeance was silent but devastating, like lava breaking through rock. To be continued. Aphrodite's charm, love, passion, and betrayal. The throne, forged from pure light, served Hephaestus not only as an instrument of vengeance, but also as a reminder of his new status. He, the lame god, rejected by his own mother, now held in his hands the threads of fate for the most powerful denizens of Olympus. But even in this realm of submission, in the silence of his workshop, where the air was filled with the smell of hot metal and the aroma of rare oils, his heart remained lonely. The loneliness he had learned to transform into art now began to seek other solace. And then she appeared, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, whose birth from the sea foam was as mesmerizing as her influence on the hearts of mortals and immortals. She came not as a victim, not as a supplicant, but as the very essence of desire, embodied in perfect form. Her steps, like the light touch of a butterfly's wings, did not break the silence, but their echo penetrated the most secret corners of Hephaestus's soul. Her beauty was not merely external, it was a radiance that came from within, a promise of pleasure that could melt even the ice of rejection. Her eyes, the color of the dawn sky, looked at Hephaestus with curiosity, mingled with something deeper than mere interest. There was understanding in them, for she, the embodiment of beauty, often felt herself a prisoner of her own nature, forced to submit to an unsightly but powerful god. "You have forged miracles, Hephaestus," she whispered, her voice like the ringing of silver bells. "But you have forgotten the most important miracle, the miracle of love." Hephaestus, accustomed to respect, but not admiration, was astonished. For the first time, he saw himself not as a lame god, but as a man whose hands were capable of creating not only weapons and machines, but also something that could captivate the very heart of the goddess. He who had always felt like a stranger among the perfect Olympians saw in her eyes the reflection of his own soul, distorted but not lost its essence. Their meetings became a secret wrapped in the scent of roses and the whisper of silk. Hephaestus, inspired by her presence, began to create for her. He forged for her a golden necklace that contained the light of 1,000 stars, so that it would illuminate her path even on the darkest nights. He created for her a mirror that reflected not only her beauty, but also her deepest desires, showing her images of her own ideal love. He forged for her a bed where silks and velvets were woven, a bed that seemed to breathe, pulsating with warmth and tenderness. In those moments, when Aphrodite touched him, when her lips met his, Hephaestus felt years of pain and loneliness dissolve. The ice in his soul melt under the gentle flame of her passion. He, who had been rejected by his own mother, found love where he least expected it, in the arms of the goddess of love herself. It was a love full of tenderness, passion, and deep, almost painful understanding. But Aphrodite's love was as fickle as her nature. It was like a sea wave, sometimes gently embracing the shore, sometimes crashing down on it with fury. Her heart, which had never known true fidelity, was open to new sensations, to new victories. And when Eros, the god of war, whose passion was as unbridled as his strength, appeared in her field of vision, Hephaestus felt his world begin to crumble. He saw them meeting in secret groves, their bodies intertwined in a dance born of raw strength and divine beauty. He felt their passion as bright and all-consuming as the fire of his forge, but lacking the depth and tenderness he gave her. His heart, which had only just begun to thaw, turned back to cold stone. The betrayal was more than just pain. It was a blow to his very being. He, who had forged a world for her, now felt trapped by her betrayal. His skill, which he had used to adore her, now seemed a mockery. He, who had learned to control fire, now felt a rage blazing within him that he could barely contain. But Hephaestus was not only a blacksmith, but also a strategist. His mind, tempered by years of solitude and observation, realized that a direct confrontation with Ares would be pointless. Instead, he began to prepare his retribution. A retribution that would be no less sophisticated than his return to Olympus. He created a net of the finest yet incredibly strongest golden threads, woven with such precision that it was almost impossible to notice. A net that was invisible to the eye, but tangible to the body. He set it up in his bedchamber, on the bed he had forged for Aphrodite, a bed that was meant to be a symbol of their love, but instead became a trap. And so, one night, when the moon was hidden behind the clouds and Olympus was asleep, Hephaestus heard a whisper. Aphrodite's whisper, calling Eros. He saw them enter his bedchamber, their bodies intertwined in the same passionate dance as before. And at that moment, when their bodies were most vulnerable, Hephaestus pulled the invisible threads. A golden net, woven from his pain and disappointment, enveloped them, chaining them to the bed. Aphrodite and Eris, gods of love and war, found themselves captives of the lame god they had betrayed. Their cries of fear and despair echoed across Olympus, waking all the gods. Hephaestus stood before them, his face calm, but his eyes blazing with cold fire. He did not shout, did not threaten. He merely said, "Now you know what it is to be trapped. Now you know what it is to be humiliated." His revenge was complete, but in his soul, amid the ashes of his ruined love, there remained only a bitter emptiness. He had received justice, but not consolation. He had shown his strength, but lost what he thought he had gained. Aphrodite's charm, so bright and deceptive, had left only ashes on his heart, reminding him of the fragility of even the most divine feelings. Armory of the gods, crafting wondrous items for Olympus. Among the shining halls of Olympus, where the echo of eternal youth mingled with the scent of ambrosia, Hephaestus found his place, not through grace, but through the inevitability of his craft. His forge, located in the depths of the mountain, where Helios's rays rarely penetrated, became the heart of the divine world, pulsating heat and the ringing of metal. Now that his name sounded with respect, and his creations adorned the abodes of the gods, he became not just a craftsman, but the guardian of Olympus, its invisible shield. After the scandal with Aphrodite and Ares, which, although it ended in his triumph, left an indelible mark on his soul, Hephaestus plunged into his work with even greater zeal. He did not seek consolation in embraces, but found it in the perfection of forms, in the subordination of the elements to him. His forge became a real workshop of divine miracles, a place where objects were born that determined the fate of the world. Here, among the glowing coals and shimmering metals, Hephaestus created more than just weapons. He created artifacts, each imbued with its own history, its own will. His hands, once twisted, now moved with confidence and strength, forging gold, silver, and bronze into something more than matter. He breathed into them a piece of his soul, a piece of divine power. Thus, by order of Zeus, he created the Aegis, a shield woven from the scales of a heavenly dragon and decorated with the head of Medusa the Gorgon, whose incarnation caused terror in enemies. This shield did not simply reflect blows. It radiated such power that even the bravest warriors lost the will to fight. When Zeus raised the Aegis, the heavens were filled with thunder, and the earth shook from his anger. For Poseidon, lord of the seas, Hephaestus forged the trident, not just a weapon, but a symbol of his power over the oceans. Its teeth, sharpened to a fine point, were capable of causing storms or calming them, discovering new lands or flooding old ones. It is said that the cracks in the rocks that cut through the coasts were left by the blows of this trident when Poseidon poured out his power on the land. Ares, the god of war, received the sword that incites fear from Hephaestus. Its blade, forged from tempered steel, shimmered red, as if reflecting the blood of countless battles. This sword not only inflicted mortal wounds, but also struck such fear into the hearts of opponents that they fled without even seeing their enemy. Although Hephaestus held a bitter grudge against Eris, he understood that the god of war needed a worthy weapon to maintain the fragile balance of power on earth. For Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, Hephaestus created the helm of the truth-seer. Decorated with shimmering feathers and ancient runes, this helmet gave its owner the ability to see through lies and deception, to penetrate the very essence of things. With it, Athena could foresee the course of battles, develop flawless strategies, and guide heroes to victory. Hephaestus did not forget his mother Hera. Although their relationship remained complicated, he created for her the diadem of eternal beauty. This diadem, decorated with the rarest gems, not only emphasized her royal grandeur, but also, as they whispered, preserved her youth and beauty, making her image eternal and unchanging. Each of Hephaestus's creations was more than just an object. It was an embodiment of the divine essence, an artifact capable of changing the course of history. His workshop, like an alchemist's laboratory where the laws of physics gave way to the divine will, became the center of Olympus's power. It was there, amid the smoke and sparks, that Hephaestus, the rejected son, found his true calling. He became not only the god of fire and forge, but also the architect of divine artifacts, whose creations were as powerful as the gods who wielded them. His craftsmanship became his voice, his legacy, his lasting contribution to the world that had once rejected him. And in the ringing of his hammer, in the radiance of his creations, one could hear the echo of his strength, his fortitude, and his unchanging divine will. To be continued. Help for heroes, shields, swords, and armor for great deeds. In the heart of Olympus, where the eternal radiance of the divine realms mingled with the scent of wild herbs and ambrosia, Hephaestus, the once spurned son, took his place of honor. His forge, deep within the sacred mountain, became not just a place of work, but a sacred sanctuary where objects were born that would determine the fates of mortals and immortals. Here, amid billowing smoke, hot metal, and the ringing of hammers, he forged his pain into art, his isolation into a source of incredible power. His creations, from Zeus's glittering aegis to Eris's fear-searing sword, became symbols of divine power. But Hephaestus's true greatness was revealed not only in his creation of artifacts for the gods, but in his willingness to aid heroes, those mortals whose deeds were so great that they could shake the balance of the world. He, who knew the price of rejection, who knew the depths of loneliness, saw in heroes a reflection of his own struggle, the pursuit of greatness despite the circumstances, the search for meaning in chaos. His workshop became a place of pilgrimage for the bravest. They came bearing the burden of their missions, their eyes full of hope and fear. Hephaestus greeted them not with solemnity, but with quiet understanding. He saw in each of them a spark of the divine, the same fire that burned in his own soul. For Hercules, the son of Zeus, whose fate was woven from incredible trials, Hephaestus forged the mace of indestructibility. Not just a weapon, but an extension of the hero's own arm. Forged from meteoric iron, it was so strong that it could split rocks and crush the bones of titans. Every blow of this mace echoed in the earth, as if the sky itself confirmed the might of its owner. Its surface was decorated with ancient runes, which were said to grant the owner endurance beyond human strength. Hephaestus also created for Hercules the girdle of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. This belt, woven from gold threads and decorated with gems, possessed not only incredible strength, but also magical attraction. It did not simply hold up clothes, it symbolized power, courage, and the will to win. Wearing this belt gave Hercules not only physical strength, but also self-confidence, helping him overcome the most terrible obstacles. When Perseus went to fight the Gorgon Medusa, Hephaestus gifted him with the shield that reflects truth. This shield, polished to a mirror shine, was made of a material that not only reflected blows, but also revealed the true form of the one who looked at it. Thus, Perseus was able to see the Gorgon Medusa without falling into her deadly gaze, and win by relying on the reflection rather than direct contact. For Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, Hephaestus forged the mind-reading sword. This sword seemed to have a will of its own, sensing the intentions of an enemy before he could strike. Its blade, shimmering with a silver light, could anticipate the movements of an enemy, allowing Odysseus to triumph even over superior forces. Sometimes Hephaestus would create simpler but no less important things for the heroes. For example, the helm of invisibility, which allowed them to sneak behind enemy lines unnoticed, or the sandals of speed, which carried them faster than the wind. Each item that came out of his forge was not just a weapon or armor, but an embodiment of hope, a symbol of the belief that even mortals can achieve greatness. He saw the heroes as an extension of his own struggle, striving for perfection, overcoming adversity, finding his place in the world. His craft, born of rejection and loneliness, now served the light, aiding those called to great deeds. And with every hammer strike, every breath of red-hot metal, Hephaestus felt his own story intertwined with the heroes, creating a tapestry of courage, fate, and divine intervention. His forge became more than just a workshop, but a place where legends were born, where mortals found the power to change the course of history. To be continued. The labors of Hercules, the creation of the mace and belt of Hippolyta. Hephaestus, god of fire and forging, whose hands knew not only the heat of molten metal, but also the bitterness of rejection, found his place in the golden halls of Olympus. His forge, located in the depths of a sacred mountain where an eternal fire burned like the heart of the world, became a place where miracles were born. From the glittering aegis of Zeus to the fear-searing sword of Ares, his creations were not just objects, but embodiments of divine power, artifacts capable of changing the course of history. He who knew the price of solitude saw in heroes those mortals whose deeds were so great that they could shake the balance of the world, a reflection of his own struggle. That is why, when Hercules, Zeus's son, whose destiny was woven from incredible trials, first crossed the threshold of his forge, Hephaestus greeted him not with ostentatious solemnity, but with quiet understanding. He saw in the hero's eyes the same fire that burned in his own soul, the desire for greatness despite all obstacles. Hercules came not for weapons to destroy, but for strength to protect, to fulfill his long and difficult mission. Hephaestus, addressing the hero whose body was woven from muscles and divine blood, said, "Your strength is great, Hercules, but even it needs a weapon worthy of your feats. I will forge for you something that will become an extension of your hand, your faithful companion in the fight against chaos." And then, in the heart of the forge, where the heat melted the hardest metals, Hephaestus began his work. For Hercules, he forged the mace of indestructibility. Not just a weapon, but a marvel of engineering, born from meteoric iron that had fallen from the heavens in time immemorial. Each blow of this hammer seemed to reverberate through the earth, as if the sky itself were attesting to the might of its wielder. Its surface was adorned with ancient, nearly forgotten runes that were whispered to grant the wielder endurance beyond human strength and the ability to withstand blows that could split rock and crush the bones of titans. The mace pulsed with hidden energy, ready to unleash its wrath on any evil that stood in the hero's way. But that was just the beginning. Hephaestus knew that a hero's true strength lay not only in brute strength, but also in his will, in his ability to lead. So, for Hercules, he also created the girdle of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. It was not just a piece of jewelry, but an artifact woven from the finest gold threads, each imbued with the spirit of the warrior. The gems inlaid into the belt shimmered like the eyes of ancient goddesses, radiating strength and courage. The belt of Hippolyta did more than just hold the hero's clothes in place. It symbolized power, fortitude, and an unbending will to win. Wearing this belt gave Hercules not only physical strength, but also self-confidence, like a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds, dispelling the darkness. Hercules, feeling the weight of the mace in his hand and the touch of the belt on his hips, felt a new strength awakening within him. He saw in these creations of Hephaestus not just objects, but the embodiment of faith. Faith in his destiny, faith in his ability to overcome any obstacle. "You have given me more than just a weapon, blacksmith of the gods," Hercules said, his voice filled with deep gratitude. "You have given me faith, faith that even in the face of the impossible, a hero can find the strength to fight." Hephaestus merely nodded, his usually introspective gaze now looking directly into the hero's. He saw in Hercules not just a mortal, but the embodiment of the ideal he himself aspired to. Strength born of struggle, greatness born of overcoming. In that moment, as the hero was given his new attributes, Hephaestus felt his own story, the story of a rejected god, intertwined with the legends of the greatest of mortals. His forge had become a place where not only objects were born, but also the possibility of feats, where mortals gained the power to change the course of history. And in the ringing of his hammer, in the radiance of his creations, one could hear an echo of his fortitude, his skill, and his unchanging divine will, which now served the light. 10. Song of Vulcan, divine music born in fire. In the heart of Olympus, amidst clouds woven from pure light and peaks touching the stars, Hephaestus, god of fire and craftsmanship, found his kingdom. His forge, hidden in the depths of the sacred mountain, was not just a place of work, but also a temple where the elements were subordinated to his will, and matter was given new life. Here, in the thick, heat-saturated air, where the smell of red-hot metal mingled with the aroma of rare minerals, not only marvelous objects for gods and heroes were born, but also something completely different: music. This was not the melody that flowed from the lyres of Apollo or the flutes of Pan. This was a song born in the fire, in the thunder of a hammer, in the whistle of hot iron passing through water. This was the song of Vulcan, the divine music that resounded in the heart of Hephaestus himself, reflecting his long journey from rejected child to master of the forge. When Hephaestus worked, his movements became rhythmic, almost dance-like. The hammer blows on the anvil, beating out the rhythm, became the first notes. Each blow was measured, precise, like a conductor leading an orchestra. The silvery ringing as it touched the thin gold sheets was like the trills of heavenly birds. The dull, heavy hum as he shaped the bronze resembled the rumble of distant thunder foreshadowing a storm. The hiss of steam escaping from the red-hot metal immersed in water sounded like a sigh, like a passionate whisper full of unspoken stories. This music had no melody in the conventional sense. It was a symphony of sounds born from the very essence of creation. It was the sound of tension as metal yielded to his will. It was the sound of relief as form was perfected. It was the sound of triumph as something new was born, something that had not existed before. When Hephaestus forged a shield, his blows became powerful, enveloping, as if the very protection of the world were taking on a sound. When he created a sword, the ringing of the metal became sharp, piercing, reflecting determination and the thirst for victory. When he crafted jewelry for Aphrodite, the melody became gentle, iridescent, filled with the scent of roses and the whisper of sea waves. The gods, dwelling in their shining halls, often paused to listen to these sounds coming from the depths of the mountain. They heard in them not simply the noise of a forge, but echoes of ancient strength, wisdom born of trials. They heard in them something that awakened in themselves forgotten feelings. Aphrodite, whose heart had been captured by passion and then broken by betrayal, heard echoes of her own pain in Hephaestus's music, but also hope for redemption. She understood that even the most destructive sounds could contain beauty, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Ares, the god of war, heard the echo of his own battles in the hammer's roar, but now a new sound was mingled with it. The sound of tenacity, the sound of a power that does not subdue, but transforms. He saw in Hephaestus not a rival, but a master, whose power was different, but no less powerful than his own. Even Zeus, the lord of the sky, whose ears were accustomed to the peals of thunder, found something enchanting in Vulcan's song. He heard in it an echo of the very force that keeps the world in balance, the indomitable energy that moves all things. This music was more than just sound. It was the embodiment of patience and perseverance, the lessons Hephaestus had learned from his exile and loneliness. He had learned to wait for the metal to reach the right temperature. He had learned to patiently shape it, slowly, without giving in to anger. He had learned to see the beauty in imperfection as he had seen it in his own body, and to transform it into something magnificent. When Hephaestus worked on a particularly difficult piece, something that required incredible precision and strength, his music became more intense, more passionate. The rhythm quickened, the sounds deepened, as if the mountain itself were shaking from his efforts. In these moments, he was not just a god, but the embodiment of the elements, directed by the will of one being. Sometimes, when the work was done and the forge was silent, Hephaestus listened to the echo of his song, which remained in the walls, in the stones, in the air. It was a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the soul, even in the harshest conditions, beauty can be born. Beauty that is gentle as the whisper of the wind, but strong as hot iron. This divine music, born in fire, was not just a symphony of sounds. It was the song of Hephaestus's soul. A song of overcoming, of endurance, of the strength that is born from pain and transformed into art. A song that sounded in the heart of Olympus, reminding everyone that even the rejected, even the imperfect, can become a source of the greatest harmony. To be continued. Chapter 11. The Kingdom of Hephaestus, the Fiery Forge, and its Inhabitants. Deep beneath the surface of Olympus, where the light of the sun was only a vague legend, and the walls of the mountains held the warmth of the earth, lay the Kingdom of Hephaestus. It was not a kingdom in the traditional sense, with a throne room, a crown, and subjects trembling with fear. It was a kingdom of mastery, where the ruler was not so much a god as an indomitable fire, and where the subjects were creatures born from that flame itself. Entering Hephaestus's realm was like entering another world. Heat wafted from the rock-cut gorge, mingled with the smell of sulfur and hot metal, an aroma that would be suffocating to mortals, but to the gods, and especially to Hephaestus, was the smell of home. The walls of the cave, skillfully crafted by the god himself, shimmered as if coated with a thin layer of molten gold, and streams of liquid fire flowed through their grooves, illuminating the way with their ghostly, pulsating light. The heart of this underground world was the forge itself. Enormous, vast, it seemed to stretch to the very edge of the world. In its center, on a bed of black volcanic rocks, an eternal fire blazed. It was not just a fire, it was a living being, the breath of the earth, the energy that Hephaestus had subjugated to his will. The flames sometimes rose to the heavens, reaching the vault of the cave. Sometimes contracted to the size of a red-hot coal, ready for a new explosion. Its colors changed from bright orange and crimson to a deep, almost black red, creating a mesmerizing, hypnotic play of light and shadow. Around this eternal flame were Hephaestus's workstations. Enormous anvils, forged from unknown alloys, seemed to be part of the mountain itself. Here, surrounded by them, lived the Cyclops, creatures with a single eye in the middle of their foreheads, creatures born from the same primordial force as Hephaestus himself. They were his workers, his brothers in misfortune and in skill. Their rough but strong hands, capable of lifting a mountain, were skilled in working with metal. They wielded enormous hammers, each blow of which echoed throughout the cave, creating a rhythm that Hephaestus himself used in his music. Their eyes, single and bright, glowed in the semi-darkness, reflecting the reflections of the flames, like stars fallen into the abyss. They were laconic, their speech consisting of growls and short, rough commands, but their work showed respect for the god of the blacksmith. Besides the Cyclopses, Hephaestus's kingdom was also inhabited by other creatures born from his creation. The automatons were metallic creatures that Hephaestus had breathed into life. They moved with silent grace, carrying out orders with absolute precision. Some were servants, carrying hot metals on their backs. Others were guards whose mechanical movements inspired awe. Among them were the gemstones, whose bodies were forged from precious stones, polished to a mirror shine. They served Hephaestus as living lamps, emitting a soft, iridescent light that added color to the kingdom of eternal fire. Their eyes, sparkling like diamonds, followed the god's every move, like birds listening to their mentor. In the far corners of the forge, where the heat was less intense, Hephaestus kept his workshops. Here, among tools forged from the finest metals and blanks awaiting their hour, he spent his days and nights. The air here was filled with the smell of the oil with which he lubricated his creations, and the aroma of the rare herbs he used to give metals special strength or shine. Here were born those very wonders that adorned Olympus and served the heroes. Hephaestus himself was the central figure of this realm. His deformed body, his limping gait, seemed to do him no harm in this world where strength and skill were prized above all else. He moved with confidence, his eyes deep and wise, never missing a detail. He would watch the Cyclopes at work for hours, giving them short but precise instructions. Then he would pick up a hammer that seemed too heavy for any other creature to lift and begin his own work. When Hephaestus worked, everything around him froze. The sound of his hammer became the center of the universe. He struck metal with such force and precision that it seemed to gain a will of its own, submitting to his design. His movements were not simply mechanical. They read history, pain, but also hope, a passion for creation. He could shape any metal into any form, turn rough ore into elegant jewelry, and red-hot lava into a shield capable of repelling the blow of Zeus himself. His kingdom was a place of contrasts. The eternal fire, symbolizing destruction, served here to create. The rough, mighty Cyclopes, born of primordial force, worked under the guidance of a god whose body was marked by imperfection. And amidst all this chaos, amidst the roar and heat, there reigned its own special harmony. Harmony born of skill, of patience, of a deep understanding that true beauty can be found even in the most unexpected places. This was the kingdom of Hephaestus, a kingdom where fire danced, metal sang, and every creation bore the imprint of its creator's soul. A place where the rejected son of the gods found his true home, his calling, and his eternal glory. Amidst the eternal flames of his forge, where the heat of the earth transformed crude ore into glittering wonders, Hephaestus, god of fire and craftsmanship, felt not only the power of the elements, but also a quiet connection to the world beyond Olympus. His realm, a realm of thundering metal and smoky caverns, was the birthplace of artifacts that surpassed any mortal creation in beauty and power. But Hephaestus, whose heart had known the pain of rejection, never forgot those who, like him, were marked by fate, who sought their way in a world full of trials. Mortals, often unaware of the gods, but driven by instinct and need, were drawn to fire. They found coal smoldering in the depths of the earth, found ore emerging on the mountain slopes, and, obeying an ancient call, tried to give these gifts of nature a new form. Their first attempts were crude, clumsy, like children playing with materials beyond the control of inexperienced hands. But in their eyes burned the same fire, the fire of aspiration, the fire of creativity. And then Hephaestus, feeling this spark, decided to share his gift. He could not appear to them in all his divine glory, could not openly grant them his patronage, for the line between the worlds was thin and sacred. Instead, he directed his energy. Invisibly, like the breath of the wind, he touched their hands, guiding their movements. He whispered in their ears when they slept, suggesting new techniques, new ways of working metal. He sent them dreams full of images of sparkling products, inspiring them to bold experiments. He gave them the gift of fire, not the destructive fire that consumes everything in its path, but the fire that transforms, that gives matter new life. He taught them how to build a flame that reaches the right temperature, how to maintain it, how to control its fury. He showed them how to use clay and heat to create durable vessels that could hold water and food. He taught them how to use stones and hot metal to shape bronze, creating the first, albeit crude, tools for work and protection. Along with fire, Hephaestus gave them the gift of craftsmanship. He guided their hands when they first tried to forge a sword, when they learned to shape iron, when they discovered the secrets of alloys. He saw how the first, albeit imperfect, but already possessing their own power, objects were born from simple, unsightly pieces of ore. He saw how their eyes lit up with pride when they managed to create something new, something that made their work easier, that protected them from danger. Hephaestus's favor was not overt. It manifested itself in unexpected discoveries, in deposits of ore that seemed to appear out of nowhere, in veins of native gold sparkling in the sun, in coal deposits ripe for mining. It manifested itself in successful experiments, when crude attempts led to unexpected success, in epiphanies, when a seemingly accidental discovery opened up new horizons. Mortals, sensing this invisible help, began to call him divine blacksmith. They did not know his name, did not know his appearance, but they felt his presence. They brought sacrifices to their fires, not knowing to whom exactly they were dedicated, but praying for success in their work, for strength in their hands, for clarity in their minds. Their crafts began to develop. Blacksmiths became more skilled, jewelers more subtle, potters more skillful. They began to create not just objects, but works of art, each of which carried an echo of that divine spark that Hephaestus had given them. He saw their creations decorate temples, serve in battle, make everyday life easier. He saw how from the hands of mere mortals came products that perhaps could not compare with the perfection of his Olympic creations, but in them there was a different beauty, the beauty of perseverance, the beauty of work, the beauty of the human spirit. Hephaestus, watching this, felt something more than just satisfaction. He felt that his own story, his journey through pain and rejection, was taking on new meaning. He, who had been cast into the abyss, who had known the bitterness of loneliness, was now sharing his gift with those who were just as vulnerable. He was giving them not only fire and skill, but hope. Hope that even in the most difficult circumstances, something beautiful, something valuable could be created. This was his quiet reign, a reign where the divine power did not suppress, but inspired. A reign where fire served not to destroy, but to create. A reign where every blow of the hammer, whether in his underground forge or in the humble workshop of a mortal, became a hymn to human perseverance and divine gift. His patronage was invisible, but its effects were felt everywhere, changing the world, transforming it, making it more beautiful and more powerful. To be continued. In the depths of the earth, where the pulse of the world was felt most clearly, and the heat of the primordial fire danced in an endless waltz, Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, continued his eternal work. His kingdom, forged from volcanic rocks and illuminated by the ghostly light of molten metal, was not just a workshop, but a school. A school where the lessons were taught by the elements themselves. And the only teacher was himself, the god who had experienced the full force and pain of transformation. Fire. It was his constant companion, his tool, his ally, and, at times, his enemy. Hephaestus saw fire as more than just a destructive force capable of reducing everything to ashes. He saw it as a symbol of purity, purification, and transformation. Every time he plunged white-hot metal into cold water, he saw more than just the hissing and clouds of steam. He saw the metal, once pliable and soft, become harder, stronger, take on a new form, a new essence. It was a mirror image of his own life. He remembered being thrown from Olympus. The fall from the sky, like a fireball, was not an end, but a beginning. The pain, the despair, the sense of rejection, all of it was like raw, unyielding metal thrown into a furnace. Then there was the solitude of the sea depths, where the care of Thetis and the tenderness of the nymphs softened his heart, as water cools red-hot metal. But the true transformation began when he discovered the power to bend fire to his will. In his forge, where the eternal flame never went out, he taught himself and his students, the cyclopes and the automatons, patience. Fire demanded respect, demanded endurance. It could not be rushed, it could not be succumbed to its fury. It was necessary to wait. Wait until the ore heated to the right temperature, until the metal became pliable but did not lose its inner strength. This waiting, this pause between hammer blows, was filled with deep meaning. In them, concentration was born. In them, wisdom was born. Hephaestus knew that perfection is not achieved in an instant. It is born of thousands of small steps, of countless attempts, of a tenacity that knows no fatigue. He had seen how the mortals to whom he had given the gift of fire and craftsmanship sometimes despaired. He had seen how their first creations were imperfect, how they broke, how they failed. But he had also seen how, succumbing to an invisible impulse, they took up the work again. They learned from their mistakes, just as he had learned from his. Every time he forged a sword, he invested in it not only strength, but also fortitude. When he created a shield, he invested in it not only protection, but also tenacity that would not allow one to retreat in the face of danger. When he crafted fine jewelry, he invested in it not only beauty, but also tenderness, the tenderness that he himself had been searching for so long. Fire was the symbol of this transformation. It could burn, but it could also purify. It could destroy, but it could also create. In its flames, Hephaestus saw the reflection of his own soul, a soul that had been burned by pain, but which had not gone out, a soul that, having passed through the fire of trials, had become stronger, wiser, more beautiful. He remembered how Aphrodite, the goddess of love, had once charmed him with her beauty. He had created a world for her, woven of gold and light. But her heart, like an inconstant flame, was subject to new passions. Their story was tragic, but it had taught him something important. That true power was not in conquering, but in transforming. That true beauty was not in the perfection of form, but in the depths of the soul. Hephaestus continued to work. His hammer pounded out a rhythm that was both a song and a lesson. A song about the strength that comes from weakness, and a lesson about how even in the heart of fire, peace can be found. He knew his journey was not over, that there was more work ahead, more trials, but he also knew he was ready for whatever challenge fate would throw at him, because he was Hephaestus, god of fire, blacksmith of Olympus, a master whose strength was born of patience, perseverance, and eternal transformation. And in every blow of his hammer, in every flicker of flame, there was a quiet but powerful lesson, that even the darkest fire can purify, and that the harshest trial can lead to the birth of something beautiful. It was a lesson he had learned himself, and which he now passed on to the world. A lesson that would forever change his destiny, and the destiny of all Olympus. 14. Completing the dome of the world. Hephaestus as the architect of the universe. In the depths of the earth, where the pulse of the world was felt most clearly, and the heat of the primordial fire danced in an endless waltz, Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, continued his eternal work. His kingdom, forged from volcanic rocks and illuminated by the ghostly light of molten metal, was not just a workshop, but a school. A school where lessons were taught by the elements themselves, and the only teacher was himself, the god who had experienced all the power and pain of transformation. Fire, it was his eternal companion, his tool, his ally, and, at times, his enemy. Hephaestus saw fire as more than just a destructive force capable of reducing everything to ashes. He saw it as a symbol of purity, purification, and transformation. Each time he dipped white-hot metal into cold water, he watched more than just hiss and clouds of steam. He saw how the metal, previously pliable and soft, became harder, stronger, acquired a new form, a new essence. It was a mirror image of his own life. He remembered being cast from Olympus. The fall from the sky, like a fireball, was not an end, but a beginning. The pain, the despair, the sense of rejection, all of it was like raw, unyielding metal thrown into a furnace. Then there was the solitude of the sea depths, where the care of Thetis and the tenderness of the nymphs softened his heart as water cools red-hot metal. But the true transformation began when he discovered the power to bend fire to his will. In his forge, where the eternal flame never went out, he taught himself and his students, the Cyclops and the automatons, patience. Fire demanded respect, demanded endurance. It could not be rushed. It could not be succumbed to its fury. It was necessary to wait. Wait until the ore heated to the right temperature, until the metal became pliable but did not lose its inner strength. This waiting, this pause between hammer blows, was filled with deep meaning. Concentration was born in them. Wisdom was born in them. Hephaestus knew that perfection is not achieved in an instant. It is born from thousands of small steps, from countless attempts, from a tenacity that knows no fatigue. He saw how mortals, to whom he gave the gift of fire and craftsmanship, sometimes despaired. He saw how their first creations were imperfect, how they broke, how they failed. But he also saw them succumbing to an invisible impulse, taking up their work again. They learned from their mistakes, just as he learned from his. Whenever he forged a sword, he put into it not only strength, but also fortitude. When he created a shield, he put into it not only protection, but also the tenacity that would not allow one to retreat in the face of danger. When he made fine jewelry, he put into it not only beauty, but also tenderness, the tenderness that he himself had sought for so long. Fire was a symbol of this transformation. It could burn, but it could also purify. It could destroy, but it could also create. In its flames, Hephaestus saw a reflection of his own soul. A soul that had been burned by pain, but which had not gone out. A soul that, having gone through the fire of trials, had become stronger, wiser, more beautiful. He remembered how Aphrodite, the goddess of love, had once charmed him with her beauty. He had created a world for her, woven from gold and light. But her heart, like an inconstant flame, was subject to new passions. Their story was tragic, but it had taught him something important. It had taught him that true power was not in conquering, but in transforming. That true beauty was not in the perfection of form, but in the depths of the soul. But as time went on, Hephaestus's eternal labor began to take on a new grand scale. His craft, honed over centuries, became so perfect that it went beyond the creation of individual objects. He began to see the world not as a collection of disparate elements, but as a single whole in need of harmony and order. His gaze, once directed inward toward the heat of his forge, now turned to the heavens. He became an architect, not of stone and wood, but of light, of ether, of the very fabric of existence. Zeus, seeing Hephaestus's indomitable power, his boundless skill and wisdom born of pain, approached him with a task that surpassed anything ever entrusted to the gods. "Hephaestus, my son," the supreme god's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Olympus stands, but our world needs a firmer foundation. You, who have mastered fire and metal, who know the secrets of creation, you must forge a dome for us. A dome that will embrace the world, protecting it from chaos and hostile forces." Hephaestus accepted the challenge with quiet dignity. He knew that this would be his greatest work, his swan song. He did not build it from iron or bronze. His material was light itself. He collected the dawns, caught the sunsets, wove into it the glow of stars and the shimmer of distant galaxies. His forge expanded, stretching far beyond the mountain cave, touching the very edges of space. The Cyclopos, his faithful assistants, no longer simply forged metal. Their great hands, illuminated by 1,000 suns, helped Hephaestus weave threads of light, stretch the fabrics of the ether. They worked in complete silence, their single eyes like beacons shining in the abyss of space, directing their efforts to the creation of this grandiose canvas. First, Hephaestus created the foundation. These were giant invisible arcs, forged from sheer tenacity and endless patience. They became the framework of the future dome, its unshakable foundation. Then he began to fill in the spaces between them. He took the light of dawn, turning it into delicate, pearlescent hues that lay on the foundation like the first layer of paint. Then he added the gold of the midday sun, giving the dome a warm, living glow. At night, He called upon the stars, collecting their shimmer into tiny diamond dusts with which he sprinkled the sky, creating an endless canvas of stars. This process was not just work, but meditation. Every wave of his hand, every breath of flame that he directed to the creation was filled with deep meaning. He saw in every ray of light, in every flicker of a star, an echo of his own history. He saw in them his pain, his loneliness, but also his strength, his resilience. He put into this dome not only his skill, but also his whole soul, all his wisdom, all his understanding of the world. He created constellations that had never existed before. He gave them names inspired by his own experiences. The constellation Lost Hope, the constellation Unquenchable Fire, the constellation The Hero's Journey. Each constellation was not just a cluster of stars, but a symbol, a message, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, there is always room for light, for hope, for the pursuit of greatness. He wove colors into the dome, the delicate hues of dawn, reminiscent of the beginning of a new day, the bright colors of sunset, symbolizing completion and peace, the cold shine of moonlight, carrying with it a secret and an enigma, and of course the deep, all-consuming black of the night, which, paradoxically, only emphasized the radiance of the stars. When the dome was almost complete, Hephaestus turned to the winds. He asked them to fill it with their breath, their movement. The winds, obedient to his will, began to swirl, creating unprecedented patterns on the surface of the dome, just as ocean waves create ripples on water. These were the air currents that were supposed to maintain harmony in the world, direct the clouds, bring rain, and carry away storms. Finally, when the last ray of light had been woven in, when the last constellation had taken its place, Hephaestus looked upon his creation. It was not just a dome. It was a world enclosed in a celestial shell. He saw in it a reflection of everything he had experienced: the fall, the loneliness, the pain, but also love, forgiveness, strength. He saw in it his own story, told in the language of light and stars. The dome of the world forged by Hephaestus was not just an astronomical phenomenon. It was the embodiment of divine harmony, a testament to the fact that even the most rejected, the most imperfect, can become an architect of the universe. He created not just a celestial vault, but a symbol of hope, a reminder that each of us contains a spark of the divine, a spark capable of transforming the world, a spark that, having passed through the fire of trials, can become a source of eternal light. And when the last stars took their places, when the silence of the cosmos was filled with the echoes of his creation, Hephaestus felt not fatigue, but peace. He had completed his journey, a journey that began with a fall, but ended with the creation of the most beautiful thing that Olympus had ever seen. To be continued. 15. Eternal work and peace. Hephaestus is the guardian of harmony and order. The dome of the world, forged from light and stars, now spread over all creation, shining with its divine radiance. Hephaestus, god of fire and craftsmanship, stood at the center of his vast forge, where the eternal flames danced in a steady, soothing rhythm. His hands, once contorted, now moved with unhurried grace, putting the finishing touches on his grandiose creation. There was no more rush, no more despair, only the quiet, deep satisfaction of a craftsman who had learned the limits of his art. He watched as the golden light refracted through the emerald waves that enveloped his underground kingdom. The scent of hot metal mingled with the scent of damp earth and rare underground flowers, creating a unique, soothing symphony of smells. The sounds of his forge, the measured breath of fire, the soft ringing of metal, the quiet whisper of steam escaping from cooling objects, merged into a single hypnotic song. A song that carried the wisdom of the ages, the calm born of trials, and the harmony found after a long journey. The Cyclopos, his faithful attendants, now moved with a slow, almost solemn grace. Their single eyes, once glowing with the heat of their work, now reflected the soft, steady light of the dome, creating a sense of peace and serenity. The automatons, his mechanical servants, glided silently through the halls, maintaining order without disturbing the silence. Even the precious gem creatures, whose bodies radiated a soft light, seemed to slow their movements, listening to this new, soothing melody. Hephaestus knew that his greatest creation was not just a vault of heaven. It was an embodiment of order, of which he was now the guardian. He, who had himself lived through the chaos of failure and loneliness, who had known the pain of rejection and the fury of betrayal, now created a structure that embraced the world, protecting it from the forces of destruction. His dome was not a wall, but a bridge between chaos and order, between darkness and light, between pain and healing. He remembered Aphrodite, her fleeting charm, her fatal betrayal. The ashes of that passion had long since dissipated, leaving behind only the bitter taste of wisdom. He no longer sought love in an embrace, but found it in the perfection of form, in the subordination of the elements, in the harmony he brought to the world. His heart, once broken, was now whole, filled with a quiet but deep sense of satisfaction. He saw how the heroes whose exploits he had once supported with his skill now found peace under his dome. Their shields, swords, and armor, forged by him, now served not only for battle, but as symbols of their journey, their achievements. Even Hercules, whose strength was legendary, now found peace in contemplating the stars that Hephaestus had woven into his celestial creation. Vulcan's song, once powerful and passionate, was now quieter, more tender. It was a lullaby for the world, lulling it with its measured rhythm. The ringing of the hammer became less frequent, the blows softer. Hephaestus no longer sought perfection through violence against the material. He worked with it like a gardener with a flower, carefully, patiently, lovingly. He knew his work was not finished. He was an eternal guardian, a guardian of harmony and order. But now this work was not a burden, but a calling. He continued to create, but his creations were different. He forged not weapons, but tools for peace. He created not ornaments, but symbols of hope. He continued to weave threads of light into the fabric of existence, giving the world beauty and peace. His realm, once a place of loneliness and pain, was now an oasis of calm. The heat of the fire no longer scorched, but caressed. The darkness of the caves was dispelled by the soft, diffused light emanating from the dome that Hephaestus himself had created. He found peace not in oblivion, but in service. He found his place not through favor, but through hard work and boundless skill. As the last glimmers of daylight faded, and the sky above the world filled with the twinkling of 1,000 stars, Hephaestus sank down onto a soft bed of volcanic ash. The warmth of the earth enveloped him like a soft blanket. He closed his eyes, hearing the soft song of his kingdom, a song that now mingled with the breathing of the sleeping world. His work was eternal, but in that moment he allowed himself peace. The peace of a master who has completed his greatest work. The peace of a guardian who knows that the world is under reliable protection. His dreams were filled with the light of the stars, the whisper of the wind, and the quiet, soothing hum of his forge. And in that sleep, in that peace, Hephaestus, the rejected son, found his true calling. He was not just a god of fire, he was a god of creation, a guardian of harmony, an architect of the world. And in his eternal work, in his eternal peace, he found his immortality. Sleep enveloped the world like a soft blanket. The silence grew deeper. And in this silence, in this darkness, lit only by the distant flickering of the stars, one could hear the quiet, even breathing of Hephaestus, sleeping in the heart of the earth. His forge was silent. The fire burned steadily, gently, like a dying candle. But its light, the light of his creation, continued to shine, lulling the world, giving it peace and harmony. And so, in the arms of sleep, under a dome forged of light and stars, the world sank into silence, preparing for a new day that would come when Hephaestus would awaken again.